Hi and welcome. In today's video, I wanted to talk about houseplant burnout or houseplant overwhelm, which I think is a very real feeling at this time of year. It's winter, our plants aren't necessarily looking their best. They're not putting out new leaves left, right and centre, and therefore it's kind of easy to sort of take a step back from it and go, and sort of lose your energy, lose your momentum and get out of your sort of routine with your houseplants. I know I've definitely been feeling like that. I think because I've had a bit of lack of routine generally over the Christmas period, I'm feeling like that a little bit with my houseplants. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 4 tips on how I get myself back into a routine with my houseplants after a period of overwhelm, and then 4 further tips on what you can do to set yourself up for houseplant success heading into the new year. But before we get into the video, hi, my name's Alexis and this is Wild Houseplants. I'm a houseplant enthusiast and I also work as a houseplant technician, which basically means when I'm not looking after my own plants, I'm looking after other people's. If you don't follow me over on Instagram or TikTok, you can find me there at Wild Houseplants. And if you do enjoy this video today, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button below because it really does help out my channel. Okay, let's talk about overwhelm. Okay, so the first thing I think is it's worth remembering that houseplants are one of the few hobbies that you can't put down. If you're into baking or sewing or crochet or art, all those hobbies, you can basically put them down, put away your supplies and then not get them out again or really think about them until you next plan to do something with them. That scarf that you're halfway through, it's not going to die or disintegrate if you don't keep knitting it every day, you know? Whereas houseplants do need a lot of our attention, and if we're not watering them or keeping an eye on pests or, you know, taking those yellow leaves off and things like that, they can start to look really sad quite quickly. And I think that can be quite overwhelming and a little bit depressing because essentially we bring these green, beautiful things into our home to add colour and texture and enjoyment into our home, but they can, when you're feeling those periods of overwhelm, start to sort of, basically overwhelm you. So it's definitely worth remembering that it is one of the few hobbies you really cannot put down. So let's think about why we might be experiencing plant burnout. Well, it might be something going on with your work. Maybe you're just super busy at work. Maybe you were working at home more during the pandemic and a little bit after that, and now you're back doing your job outside of the house more often and your plants, you're just not around them as much as you were. Maybe you have something going on in your personal life, your family life, that means that you just don't have time to be thinking about your houseplants right now. Maybe it's just the case you've got the winter blues and you're just thinking like you're sad, your plants look a bit sad and you're just not really feeling inspired by them. Equally, if it's in the warmer summer months, we can start to feel overwhelmed because there's so much to do, like they need repotting and they're getting dry like more quickly, so you need to be watering more frequently. There's so many reasons why we might feel overwhelmed. Or maybe you just have different priorities right now, especially coming into a new year. Maybe we're thinking about trying to focus on your health or eating healthily or moving more, and often we only have a certain amount of time in our day or our week. And maybe that time you might set aside for plant care, you're now trying to think about working on something else for yourself, whether that's moving your body more or whatever it might be. So there's so many reasons why we might be feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's okay to feel like that from time to time. And maybe you just need to assess why you're feeling that overwhelm. And is it a short-term overwhelm or is it a longer-term overwhelm? Because I think in the long term, you have to think about whether the size of your collection is sustainable, because nothing is worth you feeling overwhelmed for like your plants. It's just not worth it. They're here to bring like joy and enjoyment into your life. So if you're feeling overwhelmed in the short term, maybe just a week, 2 weeks, a month, that's fine. But if you're feeling really overwhelmed long term, maybe think about how you can like downsize your collection or bring the joy or the spark back to that hobby. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to write a long to-do list of all the things that I want to do with my plants. Now, once you look at that list, it might be an A4 sheet long. It might be 2. It might feel super, super overwhelming, but it's a good place to start because it sort of allows you to think about all the things that you want to achieve in the coming weeks and months. But then obviously when you look at that list, it can feel so overwhelming. You're like, I don't know where to start. I don't have the energy. I just, whatever. And so what you're going to do is break that down into bite-sized chunks. And you can do this however best works for you. So for me, I like to do it in rooms because I have different plants in different rooms in my house. But for you, it might be by like genus. So you might say, right, I'm going to tackle my alocasia today, or I'm going to do my monstera today. Or it might be by like my trailing plants or my moss poles. Just think about however it works for you really. But for me, I like to do it by rooms, and then I further break down those rooms. Well, especially in like, for example, this room, I've got about 60 plants just in this room alone. So it would be very overwhelming for me to go, right, I've got to deal with 60 plants today if I'm not feeling in the mood. So I would just tackle it down into like different sections within, like that shelf there is one section, that up shelf up there is one section, that corner is one section. So I've got all the tasks I need to do within my room here in the living room, but then I further break it down into more manageable chunks. Now, I might then say, right, okay, I'm going to tackle that shelf up there, which is actually what I'm going to do today. I'm going to practice what I preach, and I'm going to get that shelf sorted out today. But once I start doing that shelf, I may feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting in the mood a bit. It might just get me in the groove, and then I might then go, okay, I feel I can keep going and tackle something else. For example, yesterday I wrote a big long list for all my house chores, like cleaning and sorting and things like that. And again, I just didn't have the energy. I didn't even want to get going, but I decided that I was going to clear out the drawers in the bathroom. Now, once I cleaned out the drawers in the bathroom, I kind of had that sense of achievement, and I went on to clean the whole bathroom. But if I'd said to myself, right, Alexis, you're going to clean the bathroom today, I don't think I would have done it. I wouldn't have done it. I just needed a small bite-sized chunk to get myself going. However, if I do that shelf today, and then at the end of it, I'm like, I'm done, that's fine. I still get to like tick something off my list, and that is a huge sense of achievement. And I won't need to like clean those shelves again for like another few months, and I won't have to water those plants again for another probably 12 days or something like that. So I've given myself a real sort of break for the next sort of week or bit with that section of my living room. So the first thing we're going to do is break things down into more manageable bite-sized chunks. The second thing is we're going to incentivize ourselves with a little treat. And depending on how much you feel like you need a treat, that depends on what it might be. But for me, it might be like, right, I'm going to make myself a really nice coffee, and then I'm going to get going with that shelf. And if I finish that task, I might treat myself to, I don't know, it might be another coffee, or it might be like, I'm going to make myself a really nice smoothie or something like that, or a really nice lunch. And maybe that's not incentive enough for you, in which case you might say to yourself, well, I will reward myself after doing that shelf with a coffee, but if I get the whole room done, then I might go and take myself out and buy myself a new plant pot or a new accessory or something like that. I don't generally advise that if you're feeling overwhelmed, that you go and buy a new plant, but each to their own. And if that's what you feel you want to do, then that's on you. But yeah, I think if you're feeling overwhelmed, I would definitely suggest not bringing any new plants into your home right now if you're already struggling with your existing collection. Okay, so we've broken it down into a bite-sized chunk. We've got ourselves a little treat, and now it's time to get going. And I like to set an alarm. I might say to myself, right, I'll give myself 30 minutes to do that shelf, or 1 hour. And then I also try and put my phone like on silent or something like that, just so that my focus level is on that shelf and I'm not going to get distracted by something else whilst I'm doing it. Now, of course, other things like the doorbell might ring or whatever, but generally I'm giving myself a set amount of time to get it done. And I think that sort of like almost like that gamification mode in my head, like I'm on the clock and I've got an hour to get it done, just gets me going a little bit, keeps me motivated, and then I can sort of like set an alarm and keep an eye on like while the clock's ticking down, just to see how much time I've got, whether I've got a little bit more time to maybe spray all my plants, or if I've got given myself just 30 minutes, then I'm a little bit like I'm probably just going to be doing cleaning and watering. And the other thing that you might want to do rather than set an alarm, or as well as, is either put on a podcast or put on your favorite playlist. What I like about a podcast is you know how long that podcast is going to be. So if that podcast is going to be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, then you've got that time to do your shelf. So you kind of know how long you've got. If you put on a playlist, obviously sometimes we need motivation from music, and that's brilliant. I would also set an alarm, because that playlist might be 3 hours long and you might then get distracted or something else, but set an alarm, then put your music on. But I think podcasts are really great because they're a certain amount of time, like I say, and while you're listening to something, you're not really thinking about like, oh God, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, because you're kind of like, your brain is sort of elsewhere as well. And I find that keeps me motivated, and I'm like learning something or enjoying listening to something whilst I'm getting my chores done. Yeah, so those are the 4 things that I would suggest that you do if you're feeling really completely overwhelmed and you'll need to get back in the groove again. You're going to write yourself a list, you're going to give yourself one manageable task, and then you may go on to do other things, but you may not, and that's fine. You're going to give yourself a little treat either before or after, or both, you know, whatever you need to do to get it done. And then you're going to set yourself an alarm, and then you're going to listen to a podcast or some music just to keep you motivated and keep you going. Now, once you've got your little task done, and maybe not today, but maybe another day when you are feeling a little bit more motivated, then let's think about how you can prepare yourself, or prepare like your supplies and things like that to set yourself up for houseplant success going into 2025. Now, obviously right now it's winter, there's not that much going on with your plants, although if you are providing a lot of grow lights like I do, then you are still getting new growth and you may still be fertilizing. But really it's kind of like heading into March, April, springtime, when we're thinking about really ramping up on things like fertilizing and repotting and things like that. So I like to think about getting myself ready even now for kind of going into that season, because it's quite depressing January and February, let's face back. So if we can just get ourselves sorted now, when things do start to pick up again, we're kind of all ready to go, and we don't have to think too much about like, oh right, hang on a minute, I've got to get my brain into repotting and things like that. So here's what we're going to do in terms of preparing ourselves for a very successful growing season. So the first thing is prep for success. So I want you to think about what soils you're using, or maybe you're using semi-hydro, leca, whatever growing mediums you're using, get them in stock. If you're using moss poles, make sure you've got moss poles, make sure that you've got your moss, make sure that you've got some fertilizer, whatever the tools are or the products that you use, get yourself like ready with those. Make sure that coming into like March, you have your supplies ready. And that means that you are more likely to like, oh right, I need to extend that moss pole. Okay, cool. Well, I've got my stuff, I've got my poles, I've got my moss, I can just get going. And you're not thinking like, oh, I need to do that, but I haven't got it. And then you forget about it. But like actually set yourself a task to sit down, write down what you need, and then order it. Now, I'm not saying you need to have all of these fancy things at all, but if you're somebody that already has a lot of houseplants, then the likelihood is that you are already fertilizing your plants regularly, using moss poles, using alternative substrates like semi-hydro, perlite, and these other things. So if you're not using any of those, don't stress, but I'm guessing that if you do have a large houseplant collection, you probably are using those things. The next thing we're going to do in terms of setting ourselves up for success in 2025 is you are going to get rid of plants that don't spark joy. It might be a plant that's just always got pests. No matter what you do, you're treating it all the time, and it's just not really enjoyable because it's always stressing that you're like, oh, is it going to pass on pests to another plant in my collection? I'm always having to isolate it and I haven't really got anywhere to isolate it. Whatever it might be why that plant's not sparking you joy, maybe it's just kind of half been dying for a while, or maybe you just don't really like that plant anymore. And so there are always ways you can get rid of your plants. Of course, if it's like on its complete last legs, just chuck it in the bin. But if it's still going, then obviously there are Facebook marketplace, there are Facebook groups for particular different houseplants and genuses and things like that. There is obviously friends and family. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can pass plants on. Or like I say, if it is really at the end of the road and you're kind of like sick and tired of looking at this sad plant, then just get rid, because I just don't think it's worth it. Sometimes, like, I love rescuing houseplants or rehabbing houseplants, but maybe after my like third or fourth attempt with a particular houseplant, I have to just think this plant is not for me, or this plant isn't healthy. And I'm spending more time looking after trying to rehab this plant than that energy going into this one plant that's really sad and not giving me any joy could be going into making my other plants that I love happier, you know? So yeah, if there's plants that are not bringing you joy, just get rid, downsize your collection. You will feel so much happier with a smaller collection that's happy than a bigger collection when there's like 20 plants that just look like they're on death's door, basically. For me, I grow plants as part of the aesthetic of my home, and I don't feel any joy looking at a sad plant that's like half dead on its way out, unless I know it's showing signs of successfully rehabbing, or like it has looked really sad but that's putting out a new leaf, and I know that there's something happening with that plant to kind of keep me interested in it. But if it's just literally doing nothing and has done nothing for months and months, then see you later. The next thing that you can do is you can combine plants. I think a lot of us, when we first got into houseplants, went a bit mad with propagation. I know that I did, and I got really excited about propagating all different plants. Plus, obviously, with trailing plants and things like that, they are growing so fast. And so, like for example, with my sofa here, if I don't keep chopping these trailing plants here, I've literally got plants on people's heads. So I have to constantly be chopping here. And so it's very easy to be like, oh, I've got to propagate. So you can end up with many duplicates of the same plants. Now, sometimes that's nice because you're like, well, I know this plant, he's a great guy, he's reliable. I'm going to have one in the bedroom and one in the bathroom and whatever. But sometimes you're like, why do I have 5 of the same plant? Like, or you're like struggling for space and you've got all these duplicates. Think about how you can combine those duplicates together. You might actually end up getting a much more full, lush plant if you combine your 3 golden pothos than having 3 separate golden pothos. And then you've only got 1 plant to water over 3. So I think there was this thing when people started getting into houseplants, is about how many houseplants everybody had. And people were like, I've got this many houseplants, well, I've got this many houseplants. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many houseplants you've got. What's more impressive is having a nice, healthy collection that you have the energy to maintain. It's really no point in having 200 plants if 100 of them look really sad. Do you know what I mean? That's just how I think anyway. So yeah, if you have plants that you can combine, whatever it might be, think about how you can combine those, because I actually think a nice, full, big lush pot is so much nicer looking than a pothos with like just 2 stems coming out of it. So yes, think about combining plants together to make your life easier. And the last thing in terms of setting yourself up for success going into the year ahead is set a reminder to shower your plants monthly. Now, I know this feels like a lot of effort, especially if you're already overwhelmed, but wait until you've got a little bit more energy. But the benefit to showering your plants regularly is going to really set you up for success for the year, because as the weather, well, I mean, the pests can be in your plants anytime, but I know in my collection, as I start to open the windows because the weather gets warmer, that is when the pests go absolutely bananas. And one of the main things that makes me feel unmotivated and overwhelmed is when I've got pests in my collection, and they are inevitable. We're all going to get them at some point. And you kind of just have to learn to roll with it. But I know that when I'm on top of like showering my plants on a regular basis, they look so much healthier, and I don't get that sense of like, I just don't get as many pests on my houseplant. It's just a fact. So again, you don't have to do all of your plants in one day, but you might say, right, today I'm going to shower down all of my bedroom plants, or today I'm going to shower down all the plants in my kitchen. Well, if you have a garden and the weather is nice, obviously you can take them out and like hose multiple plants at a time, which is great. Obviously at the moment, with it being like, I think it was it was like 2 degrees yesterday, and we've had snow in parts of the country. So I'm definitely not taking my plants outside at the moment. But, and again, if doing a whole room feels overwhelming, then you can break it down and say, right, I'm literally going to shower those plants on that shelf today. I just think that dealing with pests and treating an infestation is so much more time consuming and just boring basically than having to water your plants on a monthly basis. So the only thing I would say is make sure when you're when you're showering your plants, that you are doing it when the plant needs water anyway, because you don't want to be oversaturating your plants. So I will wait until my bedroom plants need to be watered, and then I will put them all in the shower and shower them down, leaves front and back, and also water the plant at the same time. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you found the tips and tricks helpful, and if you are feeling overwhelmed, or you've just got over a period of overwhelm, then please drop any tips that you might have down in the comments, because they might be useful to somebody else or might be useful for me. Yeah, as always, if you have found this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.